Milling Through History presents The Bad Boys of the Executive Branch. The recent arrest and indictment of Donald Trump in the state of Georgia produced an image that seared into the minds of the American public, namely that of his mugshot. Almost as soon as it came out, Trump would use this as a fundraising tool, and people have been buying shirts and mugs and anything else that has the former president's image on it, either as a rallying cry or as a way to mock the man. And yet, in seeing this particular image and realizing that right before our eyes we are witnessing an event that really has never occurred before, a former president running afoul of the law, it does beg a question. Have there been any other presidents who have run afoul of the law? And so, in looking at the presidency and those individuals who have become president of the United States, the answer is yes. There are some presidents who have run afoul of the law at different points in their lives. And so, as we look at them, we have to begin with perhaps the most surprising person on this list, and that is George Washington. Now, before he was president, George Washington had an arrest warrant put out on him. It occurred during the French and Indian War, as Washington was being accused of trespassing and damaging property. Now, while this was done at a time of war where he was confiscating private property for the use of the military, Sheriff Meredith Helm attempted to serve the warrant twice, but failed to deliver it. Now, once the war was over, it seemed that the issue was more or less dropped. And yet, technically speaking, the warrant is still outstanding. And so, it is a rather unique piece of American history that's found in Winchester, Virginia. Ulysses S. Grant. In 1872, Grant was arrested by Officer William West for speeding through the streets of Washington, D.C. in his carriage. Now, when Officer West approached Grant, he said to the president, "Sir, I really don't want to have to arrest you, but I have to do my job." Grant understood the issue that was at hand and told the officer, "Don't worry about it, it's fine." And when it came time for the trial, Grant would pay a $20 fine for his speeding. Talking about being a brave officer, William West. Warren G. Harding. If ever there was a president who found himself in more hot water, Warren G. Harding is probably going to be the poster child until Donald Trump. During his administration, Harding would surround himself with political cronies from his home state of Ohio. Now, these individuals were so corrupt that the administration would be continuously plagued with scandals, one after the next. These scandals would range from the Veterans Bureau and misappropriation of funds there, to the selling of Federal Reserve land through the Teapot Dome scandal. In fact, numerous historians have cited that Donald Trump, in his time as president, was attempting to effectively become far more notorious than Harding through having more scandals. The only difference between Trump and Harding is that Harding had enough sense to die in 1923, thus putting an end to all the scandals. Richard Nixon. The Watergate break-in has been proven to be the most notorious part of Nixon's presidency. And for those wondering how this whole event occurred, the simple breakdown of events is this. Richard Nixon would order a group of men known as the Plumbers to break into the Democratic Party's national headquarters in Washington, D.C., located at the Watergate Hotel. When the men were found inside the building by security, they were arrested. And when they were arraigned in Washington, D.C., the question became, why are these rather notable civil servants who are rather high up in the food chain being arrested and charged with breaking and entering into Democratic National Headquarters? Later investigations showed that these men were working under the orders of Richard Nixon. Now, Nixon could have easily just claimed, "Nope, not true. I had nothing to do with it. They're just using my name to get away with it." And he probably could have put it all to bed. But his paranoia kicked in, and Nixon would dodge the questions, fire special prosecutors, and effectively, through every single day that this entire scandal was kept in the news headlines, made himself appear more and more guilty by the second. The range of guilt was so great that Barry Goldwater would approach him and say, "Mr. President, they have the votes. A a clear indication that not only would Nixon get impeached for his part in Watergate, but he would be indicted and effectively the first president to ever be removed from office. Not wanting to have that particular stigma attached to his name, Richard Nixon instead chose to resign, and as such, he is still the only president to this date ever to resign from the presidency. Ronald Reagan. The 1980s was a time period for the United States in the Cold War where the U.S. government would specifically work with any international government that was opposed to communism in order to prevent the spread of the Soviet Union. And so one government which was opposed to the communist regime was that of Iran. And so Ronald Reagan would order the sale of arms to Iran in order to gain the release of American prisoners being held by Hezbollah. However, in doing these arms sales to the Middle Eastern nation, money was skimmed off the top and then sent to Contras in Nicaragua. These Contras were fighting communist forces. And the problem which had occurred here was that Congress had passed a law preventing and limiting Reagan from being able to use funds to go after to support anti-communist groups. And so when the leak came out that this was occurring, immediately an investigation went underway. Now, the big question was just how much did Ronald Reagan know about this? A lot of people suspected Reagan knew quite a bit. And then there were those who said, oh, he didn't know what was going on. At the end of the day, though, it was Colonel Oliver North who would take the fall, as he would be the one that said he conducted the sales, and therefore cut off any connection to Ronald Reagan. But there are still those who persist today that Reagan was fully well aware of what was going on and just found the perfect fall guy to take the blame. Bill Clinton. Now, President Clinton, when being in the Oval Office, found himself almost immediately in 1993 dealing with a scandal in regards to a real estate deal he had done in an area called Whitewater. However, the real estate scandal itself probably would have blown over rather quickly if it hadn't been for the addition of sexual harassment claims. Now, these claims were being brought forward, and immediately people gravitated not just to Whitewater, but to the illicit affairs that the President of the United States was having. These particular affairs would continue to dog Clinton throughout his presidency during the first term and would lead to his impeachment in his second term in office. Now, ironically enough, though, while Bill Clinton was being continuously dogged by this, his popularity would begin to grow throughout 1997 and 1998. And by 1999, the American public pretty much didn't care about it. In fact, the vast majority of people thought that the impeachment was rather silly. I mean, the man went to have an affair, and now he has to answer to his wife, which, depending on who you talk to in the Capitol Hill area, may have been punishment enough. But by the time Clinton left the White House in January 2001, his popularity was through the roof, and some people would have argued he probably could have been elected to a third term if term limits weren't available. And so we have our list of the bad boys of the executive branch. If you know of any other presidential story that's worth pointing out, be sure to leave that into our comments section. And thanks for watching. For more information, please consider these suggested titles. Be sure to click on the left-hand side of the screen to subscribe to our show, and on the right-hand side for our latest episode. And we will see you again for the next episode of Milling Through History.